Welcome to this week's episode of Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up for the week ending January 31st, 2025. This week, we analyze major developments shaping the world of intelligence and national security. We begin with an FBI-led investigation into illicit arms transfers from China to Libya, uncovering a network that involves a former United Nations diplomat and a Montreal businessman. What does this case reveal about the complexities of international arms trafficking? Next, we turn to the UK, where a Bulgarian woman is on trial for allegedly spying for Russia. This case provides a rare glimpse into how foreign intelligence services operate on Western soil. Then, we examine a suspected sabotage attack in the Baltic Sea, where an undersea communications cable was deliberately damaged. Could this be part of a larger pattern of covert operations targeting global infrastructure? In Canada, we analyze a troubling case where an accused Iranian regime official not only entered the country, but is now suing the government to stay. How did this happen, and what does it say about our national security policies? Finally, we break down the long-awaited final report on foreign interference in Canada's democratic institutions. Neil had the opportunity to speak about this report on some major news outlets, providing expert analysis on what it means for national security. With over 25 years of experience in intelligence and law enforcement, Neil Bisson brings you professional analysis that cuts through the noise and delivers insights you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. Well, the dominating news in intelligence in Canada this week is the final report from the Haut Commission on Foreign Interference in the 2019 and 2021 federal election. I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to speak about this on some of Canada's major news media outlets, and I'll leave some of the links to those interviews in the show notes. From a global perspective, we've had everything from more sabotage in the Baltic Sea to China's persistent attempts to bait American military officers with online operations. So let's not delay and get into this week's top stories. In this week's first article, we're discussing a breaking story involving the FBI's investigation into illicit arms transferred from China to Libya. This complex case also implicates a former UN official and a Montreal businessman, raising critical questions about foreign interference, intelligence failures, and geopolitical instability. This week, Global News revealed that U.S. authorities are probing how weapons originating from China were allegedly funneled to Libya, a country destabilized by ongoing civil conflict. The investigation points to the involvement of a former United Nations diplomat and a Montreal-based entrepreneur with alleged ties to the arms transfer network. From an intelligence perspective, this case highlights two significant issues. The first, the exploitation of weak international arms control. Illicit weapon trades are notoriously difficult to track, particularly in regions with fractured governance like Libya. Two, the use of dual-use technologies. Items with civilian and military applications are often smuggled under the radar, posing a challenge for customs enforcement and intelligence agencies. These developments underscore the challenges of managing covert supply chains and identifying actors attempting to bypass export control systems. Libya, as many listeners know, has remained in turmoil since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The civil conflict has created fertile ground for weapons smuggling, with various states and non-state actors jockeying for power. Historically, China has faced scrutiny for its arms export policies. Though officially committed to non-proliferation, the country has been accused of lax enforcement, allowing private actors to exploit loopholes. This case mirrors past incidents, such as the 2016 revelation of Chinese arms shipments to Sudan during its internal conflict. For Canada, the alleged involvement of a Montreal businessman raises red flags about the country's vulnerability to foreign interference and its role, whether knowingly or not, in facilitating international arms networks. Global News reports that FBI investigators are collaborating with international partners, including Canada, to trace the origin and final destination of these weapons. UN experts have flagged the increasing use of proxies in shell companies to mask transactions. From an international intelligence perspective, this investigation likely involves extensive use of financial intelligence, supply chain tracking, and human intelligence. Coordination between intelligence agencies will be key to uncovering the full scope of the operation and preventing similar breaches in the future. The FBI probe into Chinese weapons transfers to Libya is a sobering reminder of the complexities of global arms trade and the risk of foreign interference. As the investigation unfolds, expect more revelations about the networks facilitating these operations and the internal efforts to combat them. What can we take away from this article? Vigilance in monitoring arms flow is critical, not just for affected regions like Libya, but for global security. For our next story, move on to the UK, where we'll discuss a fascinating case reported by the BBC involving a Bulgarian woman accused of being part of a Russian spy cell. With allegations of espionage, surveillance, and deception, this case offers a glimpse into the shadowy world of intelligence operations. The article details the trial of Katrin Inova, a 33-year-old Bulgarian woman accused of conspiring to spy for Russia. She's alleged to have been part of a cell conducting surveillance operations across Europe, including a U.S. military base in Germany and investigative journalism seen as threats to the Russian state. Ivanova has denied knowing her activities were for espionage purposes, claiming she believed one mission aimed to expose her corruption. Despite her denials, the operation's targets and the involvement of her partner and his associates, both of whom admitted to spying, paint a different picture. This case raises critical questions about how covert operations exploit trust, relationships, and plausible deniability to achieve their goals. Dajam Bezov and Orlin Rusev, both of whom admitted guilt, orchestrated these operations under the guise of financial and personal connections. From my perspective, this case is a textbook example of how personal vulnerabilities can be weaponized in intelligence work. Relationships, financial dependency, and trust are exploited to recruit individuals who may not fully grasp the implications of their actions. This trial not only sheds light on the intricacies of espionage networks, but also highlights the risk posed by foreign intelligence services operating within democracies. The exploitation of personal relationships and the targeting of critical individuals remain key tools in the modern espionage arsenal. As this case unfolds, it will provide valuable insights into Russia's intelligence activities and serve as a reminder of the need for robust counterintelligence measures. Well, it wouldn't be a week in global intelligence if there wasn't at least one story concerning sabotage in the Baltic Sea. This next story focuses on the incident, raising some critical questions about the security of global infrastructure and the growing threats posed by undersea cutting cables. The article highlights the damage to a virtual undersea cable in the Baltic Sea linking Sweden to Estonia. Initial assessments suggest the damage was deliberate, escalating fears of sabotage amidst heightened geopolitical tensions in the region. Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson stated the investigation is ongoing and no suspects have been named yet. From an intelligence standpoint, this incident underscores the vulnerability of undersea cables, which serve as critical communications and data conduit. Deliberate attacks on such infrastructure can disrupt financial systems, hinder military operations, and create regional instability. The Baltic Sea, surrounded by NATO and Russian interests, has become a hotspot for covert activities, particularly as the conflict in Ukraine intensifies. Undersea cables have long been recognized as strategic targets in hybrid warfare. During the Cold War, the U.S. Navy famously tapped Soviet underwater communication lines in Operation Ivy Bells. Today, as cyber and physical sabotage techniques advance, these cables are increasingly at risk. The Baltic Sea, with its proximity to Russia, NATO allies, and critical maritime trade routes, has seen increased military and intelligence activity. This incident parallels the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage in 2022, which highlighted the region's susceptibility to covert attacks. While no direct link has been made, both events signify how infrastructure and geopolitically sensitive areas remain at risk. The article quotes Swedish officials emphasizing the need for robust international collaboration to secure such infrastructure. As a retired intelligence officer, I see this as a wake-up call for nations to enhance monitoring and protection measures, leveraging satellite technology, undersea drones, and international intelligence sharing networks. In my professional analysis, the timing and location of these incidents suggests that it could signal from a state or non-state actor that they are testing the waters, quite literally, for future escalations. It's a tactic often used to probe vulnerabilities and then measure the responses. This sheds light on the growing threats to global infrastructure and the strategic importance of undersea cables. The damage to the Baltic Sea could signal a broader trend in hybrid warfare tactics targeting critical systems. Moving forward, nations must prioritize the security of these lifelines, invest in resilience, and foster international cooperation to deter future incidences. We return our focus to Canada for the next report, entitled Latest Accused Iranian Official Caught in Canada Sues Immigration Department. This story exposes a serious national security loophole. An alleged senior member of Iran's repressive regime not only entered Canada, but is also suing to remain here. Elham Zandi arrived in Canada as a tourist and later applied for a work permit. When immigration officials began investigating her background, she took legal action, claiming unreasonable delays and demanding damages. Meanwhile, the Canada Border Service Agency, or CBSA, has launched deportation proceedings against her, alleging she was a high-ranking official in Iran's government. This case raises critical questions about Canada's ability to enforce its immigration laws, screening for foreign threats, and preventing regime officials from using the country as a safe haven. At its core, the case highlights gaps in Canada's foreign interference and immigration enforcement policies. According to the article, Sandy applied for a work permit, and when immigration authorities delayed her case to investigate her past, she sued the government, seeking both a decision and financial damages. Sandy applied for a work permit, and when immigration authorities delayed her case to investigate her past, she sued the government, seeking both a decision and financial damages. CBSA has now accused Sandy of being a senior member in Iran's regime, launching deportation proceedings. Liberal MP Patrick Royler's office intervened 5 times inquiring about Sandy's immigration case, though the office claims that it was unaware of any security concerns. From an intelligence standpoint, this case raises several red flags. First, how did an alleged senior regime member enter Canada in the first place? Why did it take a lawsuit for her background to be investigated? And why is Canada's security screening process failing to catch foreign officials linked to repressive regimes? This is not an isolated case. According to CBSA, at least 18 alleged Iranian officials are living in Canada, with multiple deportation cases pending. Iranian-Canadian activists warned that Canada is becoming a safe haven for members of the same regime that many fled from. To understand the significance of this case, it's important to examine Iran's influence operations and why the IRGC is a concern for Canada. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, is a military intelligence hybrid directly controlled by the supreme leader. It's responsible for 1. Overseeing Iran's intelligence operations abroad, 2. Cracking down on domestic opposition through mass arrests and executions, and 3. Supporting terrorist groups, including Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. In 2022, Canada banned senior Iranian officials from entering the country following Iran's suppression of protests linked to Woman, Life, Freedom movement. Yet, as this case demonstrates, enforcement has been inconsistent. This isn't the first time Canada has faced scrutiny for allowing suspected foreign agents into the country. In 2018, a former Iranian intelligence officer was found living in Canada despite human rights concerns. In 2023, U.S. intelligence uncovered Iranian threats against dissidents and activists in North America. And in 2024, reports surfaced showing that Canadian-based criminal networks have helped Iran evade international sanctions. Iranian dissidents in Canada have repeatedly warned that Tehran monitors, intimidates, and even targets opposition figures abroad, using Canada's weak enforcement and legal protections to operate freely. Security experts argue that Canada's immigration and screening systems are failing to keep out individuals linked to foreign regimes. Kabe Shazuruz, a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, told Global News that Iranian officials live openly and freely in Canada and use the country as a safe retreat after years of serving a regime known for human rights abuses. He points out the double standard in Canada's immigration system. Iranian Canadians struggle to bring family members here to Canada due to visa restrictions. Meanwhile, former officials of the same repressive regime are entering and staying with ease. From my experience as both a border officer with CBSA and an intelligence officer with CSIS, this case highlights Canada's inability to efficiently and effectively enact legal due process while focusing on national security realities. Intelligence and information collected and provided to the legal system needs to be adopted, and they need to make swift and definitive decisions. Foreign actors are exploiting the immigration system using lawfare tactics, suing governments, delaying investigations, and leveraging legal protections to avoid scrutiny. Canada must strengthen security screening, improve intelligence sharing, and increase enforcement to prevent officials from abusing the system. This case is a warning sign. Canada's immigration and security systems are not effectively screening for foreign threats, allowing individuals with alleged ties to hostile regimes to enter and even sue to stay. Looking ahead, the questions are: will Canada improve its enforcement and intelligence sharing on foreign regime officials? How many more cases like Sandy's will emerge before real action is taken? Is Canada being used as a safe haven for those who once served oppressive governments? One thing is clear: Canada's national security policies need to adapt, and fast. Staying in Canada for our next story, we're breaking down the long-awaited final report on foreign interference in Canada's democratic institutions. The report confirms that what many have already suspected: foreign actors, particularly China, have been actively trying to influence Canada's political system. So what does this mean for national security and what happens next? Let's find out. The final report of the inquiry into foreign interference lays out serious concerns about how China, India, and other foreign states have attempted to influence Canada and our Canadian elections and institutions. The report suggests that Canada's response has been inadequate, highlighting a need for stronger countermeasures to protect against these threats. One of the key takeaways is that interference efforts have targeted politicians, diaspora communities, and even government officials to sway policies in favor of foreign interests. China, in particular, is singled out as a major actor, allegedly using covert tactics to influence election candidates and suppress opposition voices. From an intelligence standpoint, this aligns with patterns we've seen in other Western nations. Foreign states use a combination of cyber espionage, disinformation campaigns, economic pressure, and influence operations to achieve their strategic goals. The challenge is that democratic systems, by their nature, are often more vulnerable to these tactics than authoritarian regimes, where information and political dissent are tightly controlled. Foreign interference is not a new problem, but the scale and sophistication of these operations have increased significantly in recent years. Reports from CSIS and international intelligence agencies have repeatedly warned about China's efforts to manipulate political systems abroad. Canada has been playing catch-up on this issue. Unlike countries like Australia and the United States, which have introduced strict laws against foreign interference, Canada's legal framework has remained relatively weak. This has made it easier for foreign actors to operate within the country with minimal consequences. This report comes at a time when Western democracies are reassessing their relationship with China, India, and other nations accused of influence operations. The findings could lead to stronger policy measures, but whether Canada takes decisive action remains to be seen. The report includes insights from intelligence officials and policy experts who emphasize that Canada's lack of preparedness has made it a target for foreign interference. Many argue that the government must implement stronger countermeasures, including better intelligence sharing, stricter regulations on foreign funding, and legal consequences for those involved in these operations. Based on my own experience in intelligence, these recommendations are long overdue. Addressing foreign interference requires a proactive approach. Waiting for inquiries and reports after the fact is not enough. Canada needs to take immediate steps to strengthen counterintelligence efforts, increase public awareness, and implement legal frameworks that deter foreign actors from meddling in democratic processes. This report confirms that foreign interference is a real and growing threat to Canada's democracy. The big question now is whether the government will take meaningful action to counter it. Without stronger laws and better intelligence coordination, Canada risks falling further behind in the fight against foreign interference. We'll be keeping a close watch on these developments and whether the recommendations from the report lead to real policy changes. For our next story, we turn our attention to Australia, where the authorities have discovered a caravan packed with explosives in Sydney, allegedly intended for an anti-Semitic attack. The arrest of two men has raised serious concerns about extremism. The evolving threat landscape, and how intelligence agencies are tackling domestic terror threats. According to the report, Australian police uncovered a caravan loaded with explosive materials, allegedly set to be used in a terror attack targeting a Jewish community. Two men have been arrested in connection with the plot, which authorities believe was ideologically motivated. From an intelligence perspective, this case highlights several critical points. The first, the continued threat of domestic extremism. While much of the focus in recent years has been on foreign terror networks, homegrown radicalization remains a persistent challenge in Western nations. 2. The role of online radicalization. Authorities are investigating whether the suspects were influenced by extremist online propaganda. The internet has become a major tool for spreading anti-Semitic and extremist ideologies, leading to real-world violence. 3. Terror tactics and the growing use of IEDs. The discovery of a large cache of explosives suggests a sophisticated plan. This raises questions about whether the suspects had external support or were self-taught bomb makers using online resources. This incident is part of a larger pattern of rising anti-Semitic attacks worldwide, especially in the wake of the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. Australia has seen a rise in hate crimes, with authorities struggling to keep pace with radicalization and individuals operating outside the established terror networks. The use of improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, in planned attacks has also been a growing concern. Western intelligence agencies have long warned that individuals or small extremist cells may attempt to carry out bombings without direct ties to terrorist organizations. Historically, law enforcement agencies in the United States, Canada, and Europe have seen similar cases where lone actors or small cells attempt high-casualty attacks. Many of these plots were foiled due to intelligence sharing and proactive counterterrorism efforts. This case in Sydney underscores the importance of continuous monitoring, intelligence cooperation, and community engagement to prevent such threats. While full details are still emerging, counterterrorism experts have pointed to the importance of early detection in cases like this. The fact that police were able to seize the explosives before an attack suggests that intelligence efforts and tip-off played a crucial role. From my own experience in intelligence, cases like this highlight the need for robust surveillance, better online monitoring of extremist activity, and strong partnerships between intelligence and local communities. Preventing radicalization before it leads to violence is just as important as catching the suspects in the act. This foiled attack in Sydney demonstrates the ongoing threat posed by extremism, even in countries with strong counterterrorism frameworks. As anti-Semitic incidences rise globally, intelligence and law enforcement agencies must remain vigilant. The big question now is whether this plot was part of a larger network or an isolated case, and what steps will be taken to prevent similar threats in the future. For our last story, we're looking at a troubling report from CBS News: China using social media to target and recruit U.S. service members for spying. This story highlights how China's intelligence services are leveraging social media platforms like LinkedIn to manipulate and extract sensitive information from military personnel. It's yet another reminder that foreign espionage isn't limited to covert field operations. It's happening right on our own phone screens. According to the article, China has been aggressively targeting U.S. military personnel and government officials via social media, particularly through professional network sites. Chinese intelligence operatives, often posing as headhunters or business representatives, reach out to service members offering lucrative consulting gigs or career opportunities. The ultimate goal? To extract sensitive information about military operations, strategies, and technologies. From an intelligence standpoint, it isn't a new tactic. The Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, has long used human intelligence operations to infiltrate foreign institutions. What's concerning is the scale and ease of these operations in the digital age. Social media eliminates the needs for traditional espionage risks. There's no need for in-person meetings, dead drops, or clandestine rendezvous when everything can be orchestrated online. China's intelligence strategy relies heavily on broad, long-term collection efforts known as mosaic intelligence. Instead of seeking classified information directly, they gather bits and pieces from multiple sources, assembling a comprehensive picture over time. This method allows them to exploit security gaps that individuals might not even realize they're exposing. This isn't the first time that China has been caught targeting military and government personnel online. In 2019, U.S. authorities charged Chinese intelligence operatives for using fake LinkedIn profiles to approach high-ranking officials. Similar cases have surfaced in the UK, Canada, and Australia, demonstrating that this is a global espionage strategy, not just an American concern. The CBS article highlights warnings from U.S. counterintelligence officials who stress that service members must remain vigilant against seemingly innocent job offers and networking opportunities. The FBI and Department of Defense have ramped up awareness campaigns, warning personnel about dangers of oversharing on social media. From my own professional experience, I can say that these tactics work because they exploit human nature, ambition, trust, and the desire for career advancement. Intelligence services understand that people are far more likely to reveal information about someone they believe can help them rather than an obvious foreign agent. That's why counterintelligence training is so crucial, not just for military personnel, but for anyone in a sensitive position. China's online recruitment efforts serve as a reminder that espionage is evolving. The digital battlefield is just as critical as the physical one, and foreign intelligence services are capitalizing on the sheer volume of data people willingly share. Going forward, we can expect these tactics to become more sophisticated, with AI-generated profiles and deepfake videos further blurring the line between real and fake interactions. The key takeaway? Stay alert. Be skeptical of unsolicited job offers, especially if they come with unusually high salaries or require little work. The old adage here still holds true. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Well, there's another week of intelligence, espionage, foreign interference, and terrorism. As previously mentioned, I highly recommend that you check out the interviews that I did with CBC and CTV regarding the final report on foreign interference in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections. If you like a more in-depth discussion on this issue or any other issues relating to global security and intelligence on the show, please leave your suggestions in the comments section. All open source media links are in the show notes. If you appreciate the effort that goes into every show, please become a supporter at either Patreon or Buzzsprout website. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. From illicit arms transfers linked to China and Libya, to espionage trials in the UK, suspected sabotage in the Baltic Sea, and the troubling case of an accused Iranian regime official suing to stay in Canada, today's stories highlight the complex and ever-evolving nature of global security threats in 2025. We also examined the final report on foreign interference in Canada's democratic institutions, a subject Neil has discussed in recent media appearances. Please check them out in the links below. If you found today's analysis valuable, please like, share, or comment to help us reach even more listeners. Your support allows us to continue delivering expert intelligence insights that rival high-level government briefings. For in-depth commentary and resources on this week's topics, visit the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, where Neil provides professional analysis on the issues shaping our world. As Neil always reminds us, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe. See you next week for more expert analysis on the latest developments in global intelligence.